So I'm sure you've all been following what's been happening in Israel recently. Um, Going back a few months now, Netanyahu planned this judicial overhaul to basically take power away from the Israeli Supreme Court and give it to himself and the Knesset. And it works a little differently there compared to the U.S. In the U.S., we have a very conservative Supreme Court that basically overrides Congress, overrides the president and the executive branch, and they do it on a whim based on their own politics. In Israel, it's like the opposite. Basically, the Knesset, prime minister, like these people are deeply, deeply conservative. And then the Supreme Court actually acts as somewhat of a check on their abuse of authority. Well, they killed the overhaul because there was mass protests and a general strike in Israel. They suspended it, let's say. And just recently, they finished the job. They got it through. So there's mass protests in Israel. And basically, the public thinks, no, we want to have some sort of a check on this insane far-right government that is basically doing a slow-motion genocide and ethnic cleansing. We want to fight this, right? And it doesn't look like there's been any success to this point. It looks like they truly are trying to take power away from the Supreme Court. Ironically, the Supreme Court might rule on the law that is taking away their power, and they might say, we're not going to abide by this. This is, what you're doing is illegal. But then it'll be like, okay, there could be a standoff, and whichever side has the army ends up winning. It's a very volatile situation. Well, anyway, in the midst of all this, the ex-Mossad chief made some interesting comments. Now, Mossad, of course, is the Israeli version of the CIA. This is in Haaretz. They say, ex-Mossad chief compares Israeli right to the KKK. Tamir Pardo said in a radio interview with Khan public broadcaster that many of the laws that the government is legislating are tantamount to anti-Semitic laws and would be labeled such were they passed in any other country. Wow. So basically what he's saying is, look, if the shoe was on the other foot, with the way that Israel treats Palestinians, if we were treated that way, we would say this is brazenly anti-Semitic. Wow. Okay. He says, or here's what they say in Haaretz. The former head of the Mossad, Tamir Pardo, said that horrible racist parties in Netanyahu's coalition are similar to the notorious American white supremacist Ku Klux Klan. In a scathing interview with Khan Public Broadcaster Radio on Thursday, Pardo slammed Netanyahu for taking the Ku Klux Klan and putting them into government. When asked if he was referring to the far-right ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, and Yitzhak Wasserlof, he responded, of course. You have some outright ultra-Orthodox, settler colonialist parties in Israel. And these are people who Netanyahu has embraced with open arms. Super far right, settler colonialist, ultra-Orthodox extremists. And this is who he's gotten in bed with. Wild. Now, by the way, there was something, Sinead O'Connor recently died, the famous singer, and there was something that was floating around Twitter about how there were death threats against her. I think she spoke out in favor of like Palestinian rights or something, and there were death threats against her. And the guy who led the campaign, led the charge, threatening her to the point where she had to cancel a concert in Israel. The person who proudly led that charge, this guy, Itamar Ben-Gvir. Crazy what gets you to go far in Israeli politics, isn't it? Be the most genocidal, be the most threatening, be the biggest maniac, and you get ahead. Worse than this, I don't want to go into examples from the 1930s, he said, pointing to Smotrich's comments that the Palestinian town of Huwara should be, quote, wiped out. Wiped out. So the former head of Mossad is saying, the Israeli government, they're kind of acting like Nazis. Kind of acting like Nazis. I don't want to have to go into examples from the 1930s. But yeah, when you say, let's wipe out an entire Palestinian town, let's bulldoze houses, let's kill civilians, as they do very often in Gaza, when they quote-unquote mow the grass. The northern West Bank town has been subjected to settler violence for several years. But this culminated in a settler riot in February this year that saw one Palestinian killed, dozens injured, and widespread damage to property. A settler riot. Pardo went on to say that many of the laws that the government is legislating are tantamount to anti-Semitic laws and would be labeled such were they passed in any other country. Quote, tomorrow morning they can't enter a club. or a locality, or can't buy a house in a certain area, or have less rights. That is anti-Semitism for its own sake. So in other words, he's saying if these laws were passed against Jews, everybody would lose their mind and they would say, this is anti-Semitic, what are you doing? But when Israel passes laws against Palestinians, nobody bats an eyelash, and they support it. Interfaith marriage is a big issue there. On Tuesday, the Knesset expanded the so-called Admissions Committees law, which enables small communities to reject applicants deemed they unsuitable, and was described by leading rights organization Adala as racist. I love how they make it sound so benign, right? So administrative. The Admissions Committee law. And really, it's like you can kick out Palestinians. The ex-Mossad chief said that he held Netanyahu responsible for the unfolding crisis in the country and said that his worldview on several key issues, quote, is not so far away from those of his extremist coalition partners. Pardo, who served as the head of Israel's intelligence service from 2011 to 2016, while Netanyahu was in office, cited the prime minister's lack of vision when it comes to the Palestinian question. When Pardo confronted Netanyahu with the fact that Israel rules from the Mediterranean Sea to the River Jordan and in practice holds Gaza as the largest open-air prison in the world, quote, as the largest open-air prison in the world, he admits this, he said he was never met with any substantive response. Oh, you don't say. You want to know why? Because they support that. His vision on this issue is the vision of Smotrich, Pardo charged. Pardo said that the mass refusal from IDF reservists does not amount in an existential threat given Israel's relative strength in the region. However, he warned that if we lose high-tech, the doctors, the academia, we won't have a country anymore. Or at least he later clarified, Israel will become a third world country. In other words, you're getting a mass blowback over trying to take over, trying to axe the power of the Supreme Court, get rid of any checks and balances. There's a mass blowback over this. And you're going to lose the people. You're going to lose the people. And there's a mass blowback over, a lot of the settler colonial violence, the bulldozing of Palestinian villages, kicking people out off their land, slow motion ethnic cleansing. He's like, look, if you lose these people, it's a wrap anyway. When pressured on how far civil disobedience should go, Pardo said he would do everything possible to stop Israel from becoming like North Korea. He ended on a more optimistic note, stating that he believes that more than 90% of Israelis want to live in a democracy and that there is a critical mass of Israeli citizens that won't allow us to reach this dismal point. And by the way, again, you have seen a tremendous backlash to this attempt to take power from the Supreme Court. I mean, you got people from all over the political spectrum out there in the streets, and they're not taking it. I mean, they did a general strike, man, and they'll probably do another one if they're not already. And they are fighting back. They are trying to keep their democracy effectively. But, man, some amazing admissions here. Flat out saying the ex-head of Mossad, yeah, Gaza's an open-air prison. Flat out saying it. Saying, yeah, he's basically in bed with the Ku Klux Klan. He's basically in bed with ethno-nationalists, with ultra-Orthodox, settler colonial extremists. It's quite an admission. This guy, the ex-Mossad head, is speaking more openly and honestly about Israel than the U.S. president or any politician in the U.S. That's so sad. That's so sad. We send them weapons. We send them money. We give them endless support. And they won't even keep it real and say what this guy's saying. You should absolutely condition that money. You're not getting another penny until we address Palestinian rights and stop all the rampant and wanton violations of international law. Again, don't take it from me. Take it from the former Mossad head. The Israeli government is basically like the Ku Klux Klan. I didn't say it. He did. But I think he's right. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.